Agent Maynard had realized that the quickest way to get support to Brett was through the police force. She had told them there was a hostage situation at the amusement park, and with her federal credentials, they had scrambled their men. They were a bit surprised when they found out they were supposed to be taking the hostages, but Brett explained the situation and they were able to house them at the local jail until Major Blackstone could get his men out to collect them. "Looks like that tip you got was in the ballpark," Blackstone told Maynard after they had the opportunity to interview the captives. "These guys were apparently working with some of the nationalist groups, giving them weapons and money. They were planning some kind of attack in Charleston." "So the ultra-nationalists had foreign backers? That's ironic," muttered Maynard. "Ain't it, though? In any case, turns out these guys aren't just here in West Virginia. They've got people spread out all over Appalachia and the Midwest. You two need to hoof it over to Indianapolis, where another cell is planning something. There's a Bureau airport just across the river in Ohio. Drive over there and link up with Agent Kirkenfield. He'll take you to Indiana." With that, the Major left. Maynard walked back across the gloomy parking lot to the van, where Agent Brett awaited her. She explained the plan to him. "Sounds pretty vague," he remarked. "No kidding. I guess Kirkenfield will fill us in when we meet him. For now, let's just focus on getting there." They drove back through the winding hills and away from the field office. As they drove across the silver Memorial Bridge in the early morning hours, Agent Maynard glanced back and thought for a moment that she glimpsed a white figure standing atop the bridge. But in the fog and the pinkish light of dawn, it was hard to say for sure. When they reached the location that their GPS was programmed to lead them to, the two agents looked at each other, a bit surprised. For a Bureau field station, the place looked pretty run down. It was simply a large fenced-in field with a paved runway running the length of it. There was one large building that appeared to be an old grain barn on the south side of the paved airstrip. Brett cautiously got out of the van and approached the large barn. He kept one hand on the grip of his holstered Glock pistol, preparing himself mentally in case he was in for another surprise like he'd had at the amusement park. At that moment, a short man in a bomber jacket walked out of a door on the side of the silo. "Hello, Brett," the man called. "The Major let me know you were arriving. Come on in." Brett glanced back at Maynard, who nodded slightly. He followed the short man inside the barn. The interior was not at all what one would have guessed from looking at the outside. It was all steel and shining synthetic materials. Soldiers in black uniforms with Vector submachine guns were stationed at the doors at both ends of the building. And at the center, on a kind of rotating platform, sat a sleek black jet, the likes of which Brett had never seen before. "Beautiful bird, isn't it?" asked the man in the bomber jacket. "It'll have us out to Indy soon enough. Agent Kirkenfield, by the way," he said in an offhanded manner. Brett nodded. Maynard had come in behind him and was looking around at the impressive hangar. She whistled. "This is some serious stuff you guys have out here. Lot better than some of the bases we've seen before." Kirkenfield nodded. "They've been really upgrading us ever since these kinds of rebellions became so common out here in the Central States. Talking of which, I understand from the Major that you have yet to be briefed on what the next move is." "He said you'd take care of that," said Maynard. "Right," he replied. "Get in, and I'll explain on the way." The interior of the jet was also sleek and new, but also quite Spartan. It was clearly designed for quick get-in and get-out ops. As the jet taxied onto the runway, Kirkenfield began explaining things. "Learning about these Russians being involved in West Virginia was a big break. Try to find out if they're mixed up in this situation, too," he said. "But the long and short of it is, there's chatter about some kind of operation being run by a militia-type group that's been listening to this guy Nightingale on the radio. Apparently, they've started buying into a lot of the conspiracies getting tossed around on there." "Just like Gullahan," muttered Brett. "So, what exactly are they planning to do?" asked Maynard. "We don't know. That's the thing about chatter," replied Kirkenfield. "Just that they're up to something. And there's one other thing to keep in mind." "And that is?" "Nightingale owns a ranch out in the Indiana countryside. He's not there, of course, but his fans like to gather around there. Could get interesting. It was afternoon by the time they landed in Indiana, in another inconspicuous location, but this one was at least a bit nearer the city than the one in Ohio had been. A policeman was waiting to meet them when they stepped off the plane. "The situation is getting worse," he said without any introduction. "It seems there's some sort of standoff going on against the Nationalists." "What?" said Maynard. "When did that start?" "It's a crazy situation," he explained. "Apparently some government bureau, not one of ours, needed to seize Nightingale's ranch for some reason, and he talked about it on his show. Well, his fans got wind of it, and so they showed up at the place. And they're armed." Brett and Maynard headed to the ranch immediately. It was set about 500 yards back from the long country road in the flat Indiana countryside. Near the road were parked dozens of armored military-style vehicles, painted black with Department of War, FBI, OSS, and other agency names on the side. Through his high-powered scope, Brett could see the ragtag group guarding the ranch house. They were, for the most part, bearded, older men, with a variety of rifles, mainly on the AK and AR platforms. Some wore military fatigues, others wore jeans and t-shirts emblazoned with the familiar "Don't Tread on Me" flag. Some were equipped with antique-looking cowboy gear, and still others had foreign equipment Brett had never seen before. This bunch was clearly no match in terms of firepower or training for the government agents positioned across the Indiana plain from them, but they held one advantage over the Federals. Since they were technically acting against the law already, they no longer needed to feel constrained by any laws. The voice of Hector Nightingale crackled over the radio in one of the trucks. They were monitoring everything he was saying on his program. "The idea of me being backed by the Soviets, I mean the Russians, it's crazy, people. Now look, I don't condone what these guys are doing on my property, but I don't condone what the government is doing either. Has this whole country gone mad? It's like the Mask of the Red Death in the US of A." Police barked orders, people yelled slogans through megaphones, and reporters scurried about further away from the scene, filming segments for the evening news and trying to spin this absurd paramilitary circus into a narrative that fit their respective employers' political agendas. And then the first shots rang out.